الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Him, we praise Him, we glorify Him. Beseech Him to send His choicest salutations upon His most beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and upon all those who choose to tread in His path until the last day. So people want to pull up the text. We're looking at the Book of Assistance by Imam Al-Haddad. If you just Google Book of Assistance PDF, the text will show up. And we're on the chapter on awrad, regular devotions, having a wird, like a daily litany. It's the 5th chapter. We'll probably just get right into it because Maghrib comes in about an hour. We want to be able to maximize as much time as we can, inshallah. People want to pull it up. So just as a recap, this is a text that is on spirituality. And if we were to give a baseline definition to spirituality, it's a mechanism through which we draw meaning from the environment that we're situated in. Right? The ability to understand and comprehend things not at just a surface level, but to see everything as signs and to be able to inculcate from those signs a depth of perspective that is not drawn just from a vision of the eyes, but a vision of the heart, what is called basira. Ours is a religious tradition that does not separate religion from ethics and spirituality, but it synergizes these three realms into a broader mode of engagement for an individual practitioner to be able to connect to oneself and in turn, through that connection, connect to the divine. And so we've been looking at these different chapters. Imam Al-Haddad presents a roadmap, going through it in easily digestible forms of chapters, a page to a handful of pages. This chapter on awrad is one of the longer chapters. But he starts out with yaqeen or certitude, right? Having a deep faith, and this is the first chapter. It's a destination. So all of us have distinct starting points, but it gives the reader now an objective that can be common regardless of the distinct starting points that we have. Then goes into intention, niyyah, an understanding of knowing why you're doing what you're doing before you actually do it, but also establishing and affirming it as a base point so that when you are moving forward, you can always look back to say, am I actually going where I had thought I was supposed to be going? The third chapter is on muraqabah, or vigilance, that you're essentially looking over your heart so that your heart could look over you. And these first three chapters, they're all on actions of the heart. The fourth chapter on the outer and inner self now moves from just actions of the heart to a broader sense of self and brings us to this 5th chapter on awrad, having a daily litany, the wird. And we're in the middle of the chapter. We had just, I think the last time we met, spoken about the importance of the sunnah in relation to this idea of having a wird. Right? So Imam Al-Haddad, he says, rahmallah, that when there's an opportunity to pray a sunnah prayer, don't pray something else, but observe the sunnah prayer during that time. And we talked about the verse in the Quran that says, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ, as a basis of why we want to ascribe to the sunnah. Right? That this is a verse in which the Prophet ﷺ is commanded to say, if you want to have the love of the divine, right? قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ, if you want Allah to love you, فَاتَّبِعُونِي, then follow me, يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ, then Allah will love you. But the basis of this is to understand that you're not adopting the sunnah for the sake of just adopting it, but when we refer to it as the authoritative example of the Prophet ﷺ, the idea is that it's a mechanism of both increasing and the giving of love and the reception of love. Right? And love is a very powerful value that enables you to be able to move with a different kind of strength and courage. We talked about this a lot last time, but just to get us to where we are now, so that we can kind of move forward and end this chapter and hopefully get into the next chapter, because both will have a relevance to Ramadan, which is just a few days away. May Allah enable us to reach it and benefit from it. I'm like super jet lagged, just so you know. I don't know what was going on, but I sat down to do something and then I think I fell asleep and I woke up. I think I'm still a little half asleep, so I apologize for that. But after going to Turkey and then coming back and then going for Umrah and coming back, my internal clock is a little bit messed up, so apologize. I don't think I'll fall asleep while I'm talking to you, but if I do, please just come and shake me a little bit and we'll wake up. So we want to get to page 20 in the last paragraph where he says, "It is sunnah to give life to the period between the two night prayers with devotions." Does somebody want to read that out loud for us to start us off? Do we have it? Anybody? It is sunnah to give life to the period between the two night prayers with devotions. It's the last paragraph on page 20 of the text. It's page 13 of the PDF.
It is a sunnah to give life to the period between the two night prayers with devotions. Many hadiths and other traditions have been transmitted regarding its merit. It should be enough to know that when Ahmed ibn Abdul Hawari asked his Shaykh Abdul Sulaiman, may God have mercy on them, whether he should fast by day or give life to the period between the two night prayers. He advised them to do both, to which he said, I cannot, for if I fast, I become occupied with breaking my fast at that time. He replied, if you cannot do both, then leave daytime fasting and give life to the time between the night prayers. Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, has said, the Messenger of God, may blessings and peace be upon him, never entered my house after the late night prayer, Isha, without praying 4 or 6 rak'ah. And he said, may blessings and peace be upon him, 4 rak'ah after the night prayer equal the same on the night of destiny.
Okay, so what is it that the text is telling us here? What do we draw from this? The recognition that there's a uniqueness now after we've established the sunnah's importance, right? And the two can't be disconnected, because the adoption of what is supererogatory, what is recommended, mustahab, what is a confirmed sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, what we call a sunnah mu'akkada, the ability to now increase in love through the implementation of these acts has to be a frame and a prism through which you can understand the relationship that you have to both the night as well as praying in the night. We have a lot of different things that mention unique times and blessed times within our tradition, right? So for example, we're going to have Ramadan coming up in a few days. There's a hadith that literally says, tasahharu, that take sahur, eat the morning meal. Inna fi sahur barakah, that indeed in the sahur is blessing, is barakah. And barakah is the opportunity to do more with less, right? Some of you went for Umrah with us, some of you have gone on your own. I told people before we left, you're going to be able to go off of very little sleep. And you're just going to be able to do things that you couldn't anticipate you could do. And if you've gone and you've experienced this, it's not a theoretical. Even people who would quote unquote understand themselves to be not the most religiously observant people, when you're in Medina and you're in Mecca, you're able to go off of much less sleep. This is just what it is. Has anybody experienced this when you've gone? Yeah, you have. I know others of you have, right? It's crazy that you're there, and it's not theoretical now, it's experiential, right? There's barakah in it. You have to choose if you want to bring that actively in your life. And our tradition gives us the ingredients to tell you this is how you can do this. So if you're dealing with feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling anxious and everything just feels like there's not enough time, part of the recipe to this from our spiritual tradition is to bring more barakah into your life, to bring more blessing into your life. The aspects of the night have a unique blessing to them. The same way there's certain things that we can just identify that are like the cities of Medina and Mecca, actual locations. They have blessing and barakah to them, right? The city of Jerusalem has blessing and barakah to it. May Allah enable it to be free and make us a generation that sees a free Palestine in our lives. There's barakah in these locations, right? There's barakah in certain times of the year. Ramadan is not like the rest of the year. It is just a very different time. There's certain states in which one can enter into that increase blessing. The fasting person when they break their fast. The fasting person as they break their fast. These are different states of being. When it's raining outside, when you are traveling, these are times that dua is more readily accepted. Between the adhan and the iqamah, these are times when dua is more readily accepted. There's so much that's just there that is what it is. There's no other way to mince it. That's what it is. And so in the night, there's a unique opportunity for barakah that this part of the text is now going to align with one's spiritual diet. If you are serious about it, you're going to take advantage of the unique portion of the nights. And Imam al-Haddad is saying that it is part of the prophetic legacy to be able to give life to that portion of the nights. That the Prophet ﷺ was somebody who always was engaged in the night vigil, the tahajjud, the qiyamul layl. It was part of what allowed for his heart to be softened and to be tender and to be something that he could now utilize as a mechanism to deal with the difficulty and the hardships of his days. And so here the example that he gives is of the sheikh who says, if you had to choose and you had to make it an either or, this is not obligatory fasting that he's talking about. But if you had to choose between observing a fast during the day or awakening in the night to pray, he says then awaken in the night to pray. That this is something that you want to choose over that. The beginning of this chapter is rooted all in being able to structure your routine in a way that allows for you to now understand that time management is essentially self-management. And if you're not designing your life, someone else is going to design it for you. And if you want to be purposeful in designing your life, then there has to be elements through which you are choosing to take advantage of the night for which it was intended to do. I want you to think about this and juxtapose two examples. The utilization of the nights in this way that the text is saying, and the utilization of the nights in the ways that we potentially are using our nights these days. I'm not saying it is a good or a bad, but just think about it. Because it's one to say that you're like me, who's sitting here half asleep, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to knock out right after Isha is done. But then I'm going to wake up again probably tomorrow at about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, well before the time Fajr comes in. Some of you wake up in the middle of the night and you think about it through a paradigm that says, why am I not able to sleep? Versus shifting the paradigm to say, what is Allah waking me up for in this hour? What is it that I am being brought to in terms of the du'as that I'm making during the course of my day, the course of my night, asking for certain things, and then the middle of the night comes and I'm awake. And I want you to think about and juxtapose the reality of what this says to what I individually might be spending my night doing. Because if you can make an argument that says, I just can't stay awake past 9:30 p.m. I'm just not able to do it. Isha comes and then that's it. I'm done for the day. If that's the argument that you're going to make, that's fine. But if you are staying awake after Isha at all, you have the opportunity to pray some extra rak'ahs of either qiyam, which the difference between qiyam ul-layl and tahajjud is whether you go to bed or not. If you don't go to bed, then it's qiyam ul-layl. If you go to sleep and wake up and pray, then that's tahajjud. But the first thing that you have to understand is if you are staying up past Isha at all, not the time you pray Isha. If you pray Isha at like 2 in the morning, not the time you pray Isha, the time Isha comes in, right? It comes in tonight at like 8:20 something, okay? If you are awake past that time, you have the ability to do this. Does that make sense? Yeah? Why would you want to pray this? What you know of the Qiyam ul-Layl, the Tahajjud, what is the point of it? What's the benefit? Can we have people just move up this way? Because people are going to trickle in as Maghrib comes, and we don't want them. If you could fill up these seats right here, that would be great. So what I want you to do is just turn to the person next to you, and what you know of what the Quran says, what the Hadith says, or for yourself, what you've experienced in terms of other places in your life, Ramadan, Medina, Mecca, whatever it is. Why is this something that you feel like is an important thing to do? Drawing upon our texts, why is this something that's so emphasized? Why would this sheikh say, if you're going to choose between observing a fast during the day or praying at night, because the fast would keep you from being able to pray at night, then choose to pray at night. Why is that? So turn to the person next to you and just talk this out a bit. What is some of the things that you feel like are the importance of this that we can draw on, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead.
I guess it's one of those things that's a work in progress. I guess it's one of those things that's a work in progress. I try to make sure that I get the right amount of as put in the prayer.
He descends to like the last third of the night.
And it's really fascinating how the wisdom in our tradition is just so much bigger than so two things I came across recently were that what you think about before you go to bed, how you act on the subconscious, and if you think positively good things before you go to bed, that models your day for the following day. And I was thinking, wow, that's exactly what we do. Because you're praying before you go to sleep. You're focusing on the good things. And they even said one thing I came across was try to focus on the everything you're grateful for what you have, and that's what we do. It's Thursday. I don't know if that's
I can't answer that. There's been people saying it's, they don't know that. I mean, I don't know that. I think that some people do the calculations, some people are doing the studying. I have no idea. I'm just waiting for someone to say, like, okay, this is what you say. I mean, I'm just like, sitting there. Which is nice, at least, because it's just like, what's nice is the first day isn't necessarily like the fasting.
Between 3 and 5
I mean, by like our studies, it's like positive on the first day, it's like,
kind of intertwined.
but then it starts, fasting starts the morning after. So that's,
really interesting.
I believe Wednesday evening, I heard Wednesday evening. You heard that?
Yeah, I think that's just really interesting that people are discovering now. one time of the day, because I'm like, I have trouble sleeping, so either I until then, or I wake up at that time, so it's either awake either as a result of like jolting awake, or like oh, I'm up to like 4 or 5, and then go to sleep for 3 hours and then wake up. But I feel like that is like the most peaceful time. It's like there's nobody who's, I don't know, if there's just feeling like I don't think it's in your mind to think about not just like the tasks of the day, but also like focusing on how are you doing. I just feel like that helps me a lot as well. Introspection in a way. And like if you need something, then that's the best time to pray. There's an energy like descends to the seven like the sky that time right before Fajr. And then like the third part of the night, he comes out and he asks for anyone who wants to forgiveness and forgives them, and he asks for anything, he forgives it to them. That is such a part of the night. So I count myself really lucky, and I always find myself like that is the one time in the day where I'm like able to not just think about the tasks or what I need to do, like the daily situation, but also
Okay, so what are some of the things coming up for people? What are we talking about? Who wants to start? And that's a beautiful example, and there's so much that's there, right? You can't self-deprecate your way into having a relationship with the divine. This is a tool of shaitan. So you don't want to say, I only go when something is heavy to be able to find some healing for the heaviness. That's the whole point of the tahajjud prayer, right? And the Prophet ﷺ did this with regularity, where he was in a state of real difficulty throughout the course of his day. And he was able to leverage the night prayer as part of his self-care strategy. But the other thing that we can unpack from this is you gotta be able to think about it in this way. The same idea that you can go and stand in the Rawda of Medina, right? And may Allah make us from those who are the dwellers of the gardens of His Jannah. You can stand in the depths of the night there in what is the gardens of paradise, the Rawda in Medina. You can go and stand in front of the Kaaba in Makkatul Mukarramah, and there's benefit and blessing in that. And people can make the connection, and they can say, yeah, of course, I want to go and stand in front of the Kaaba. I want to go and pray in the illuminated city of Medina. What tahajjud is a unique blessing, just like those things are blessed. And you don't have to travel across the world. You just got to get out of your bed and go into the last part of the night to be able to feel some of that just in your own home. Do you understand? Does that make sense? And when you experience it going to these other places, you experience it seeking out Laylatul Qadr, you experience it in Salatul Tarawih, in Ramadan, you experience it, there's still opportunity to engage in that in the course of your nightly routine. And even if you don't do it every night, but you don't have to get on a plane and fly across the world every single night to experience this, right? When we went to Medina and Mecca in December, my 7-year-old Kareem, he said, Baba, let's just live in Medina. And I said, why are we going to live in Medina, Kareem? And he said, I love hearing the adhan all the time. And then after he talked about that, he said, it's great, the buffet breakfast at the hotel. I have pictures of him with his friends walking through the supermarket there, Bin Dawood, and they're going through the candy aisle like they're walking through heaven, because everything is halal. They can eat every gummy and every marshmallow and every other thing. They love it. And I was like, hey man, I don't know how to break this to you, but people in Medina who live here, they don't live in 5-star hotels every day. Every morning does not wake up to a breakfast buffet that is the greatest thing you'll ever eat in your world, right? And if we live here, you're definitely not eating candy 5 times a day after every prayer that you pray. You know what I mean? But fundamentally, he had a desire to want to be there for the rest of his life. And what tahajjud offers is not the experience of being there, but you still get a taste of it when you're in your house. You're still in a place where it doesn't have to be an either or, it could be a both and. You just have to engage it as a practice. And you got to start to think about the why behind these things. What is the yield from it that can only be gained if you actually do it? And if you don't do it, what are you doing other than that thing in that moment? You see what I mean? Umar ibn al-Khattab, before he becomes Muslim, he says that there's a night where he is looking for something to do in the lateness of the night. And the hours are so late that the taverns are closed and people have gone to do whatever they're doing. And he says it's so late that he can't even find a place that will sell him something that he can drink on his own. So he decides to go and in whatever form of worship that he understands worship to be at that point in his life, to where the Kaaba is, to engage in that worship. And he is astonished because he believes that he will find emptiness there, and instead he finds the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam engaged in his own prayer. That when everyone would go to be with what they loved, Allah would have the Prophet alayhi salam be with him in those late hours of the night. It's not a question that can be answered if you jump to defend yourself. It's literally like 2 rak'ahs, 4 rak'ahs, a handful of rak'ahs on top of what you're doing after the Isha prayer. What else did we talk about when we were talking in our little groups? What were you discussing? I heard everybody talking. Yeah.
So it's interesting because there are psychology articles out there that are talking about new recommendations that are based on our tradition. So they recommend things like, before you go to bed at night, be thankful for what you have, think about positive things, that everything is going to work out. And that's what we do. And then also they discuss that between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m., sometimes when people wake up, it's because people are searching for answers and trying to resolve grief, which is also what people can solve by praying at that time.
Yeah, amazing, right? And it's there. You just take the last step towards it in your own spiritual diet. And to be able to think is not just for the people who look a certain way or are the most practiced. It's for you and me. It's for every single Muslim. Allah made it super easy. And in the part of the world that we live in, Isha doesn't get like crazy late, right? I've been to Denmark at certain times of the year, and they have half of the year, like Maghrib is at 10, Isha is at 12, Fajr's at 2 in the morning. And they got to figure out Ramadan in that circumstance, right? On the other end of it, Fajr's like super late. So I was there at a time when Fajr was late. This guy was sitting down with me. He was like very heartfelt. He's like, I can't wake up to pray Fajr. It's so hard. And I was like, I know, brother. It's okay. Tell me, like, what makes it difficult? He's telling me all these things. And this was the first night I was there. And I was like, what time is Fajr tomorrow? And he's like, 8:30 in the morning. I was like, man, I gotta tell you something. If you're missing Fajr at 8:30 in the morning, that's on you. I can't offer you any compassion, you know? But on the other end of the night, on the other end of the year, it's like super late. And everything's back to back to back, right? The way before daylight savings time, for us, it was like Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, back to back to back. And then Isha is at like 6 o'clock, up until a week ago. This is what it is for them in terms of Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, the nighttime hours. It could be a lot more difficult. You can't guilt your way into this. This is why it's a sunnah practice, and we talked about this in detail last time. It's got to be about love. You have to want to have the love that makes you feel strong. By feeling loved, you feel strong, and it lifts the veils that allows for you to experience God's love, which is continuous. He is al-wadud, the source of love, the giver of love. You're feeling grief at 3 in the morning, who are you going to go and turn to? You turn to the divine, the source of love. You're feeling in a place of loss, you're searching for something. Where are you going to go? And you just have to want it. That's what the thing is. Let's continue reading. And so, where he continues, he says, pray at night, for he has said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best prayer after the prescribed ones is the nighttime prayer. And the superiority of nighttime over daytime prayers is like the superiority of concealed over public charity. It has been related that concealed charity is 70 times better than public charity. He has said, may blessings and peace be upon him, keep rising in prayer at night, for it was the way of the virtuous who came before you. It draws you nearer to your Lord, atones for your sins, forbids you from evil, and protects the body from sickness. Know that the one who prays after the night prayer has risen at night. Some of our predecessors used to pray their wird early in the night. However, rising after some sleep constitutes a defeat for the devil, in opposition to the ego, and contains a wondrous secret. This is the tahajjud which God commanded his messenger do in his saying, perform tahajjud by night as an act of supererogation for you. It has been related that God wonders at a servant who rises from his bed from his wife's side to pray. He takes pride in him before his angels and turns his noble face towards him. Know that it is an ugly thing in the seeker of the hereafter not to rise in the night. How can he not, when a seeker should always be asking for more and exposing himself to his gifts at all times? For he has said, may peace and blessings be upon him, there is in the night a time that no Muslim servant of God encounters, and in which he asks God for some good of the world or of the hereafter, but that he grants it him. This happens every night. There's certain principles that we can draw from this now that are characteristic, that are true whether we believe them or not. And this is a thing that you have to understand about our religion and our theology and everything that goes into it. It doesn't need for me to believe it for it to be valid. It doesn't need for me to practice it or engage in it for it to be something that is still true nonetheless. And you have to determine for yourself what it is that you buy into fundamentally. And do you buy into what this is? And you can hear a lot of people give talks that they say it in a way that is not meant to be clever. You can't take this as something that's entertainment. It has to be about education. So you can believe in God and believe in God's messenger, but it doesn't mean that you believe them when they tell you things that are good for you. And the way that you believe them is by acting upon what it is that they're telling you. Here now the principles are being drawn out. 1, the superiority of nighttime over daytime prayers is like the superiority of concealed over public charity. And the best prayer after the prescribed ones is the nighttime prayer. The best meaning in terms of the virtue, the benefits that you draw from it. So the 5 daily prayers are things that come right at the top if we're to create a hierarchy. And we talked about this in the first day. We talked about this chapter that you got to do those prayers. And we talked about hurm al-waqt, the sanctity of the prayer. And if you remember some of the people that were sitting here talking very vulnerably about what it's like for them when they pray earlier rather than praying later, and they can observe the sunnahs more easily when they're deliberately praying on time rather than being lazy with their prayers, right? This is what you all said, not what I said. So when we move now from this, you do the daily prayers, and then here you have the virtue of the night prayer. And it is distinct from the daytime prayers that are extra. So if you're going to pray the Ishraq prayer after sunrise, you're going to pray Salatul Duha in the forenoon, you're going to be doing these extra prayers, then Tahajjud is better than these prayers hierarchically. And when he starts to now describe what it is, he says, keep rising in prayer at night, for it was the way of the virtuous who came before you. Meaning that when we talk about tradition, right? When we say this is a tradition that we're a part of, you're not just something that exists in the moment, but there are 1,400 years of lived tradition that you are a part of. It's something that's alive. It's a living tradition. It's not something that's archaic or antiquated or exists historically in a context that is years before you came to be. And the people who had a certain air of righteousness to them, they did these things. Not the people who were grimy human beings. Not the people who were terrible. Not the people who mistreated people. What does a good person look like in your eyes? Right? And you think about the Messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who smiled and greeted everybody, who made everyone feel like they were the center of his attention, who always made time for those who were in a place of need, regardless of their age, their race, their culture, their class. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a good person, a good human being, and he did this thing. And the claim that is there is that this thing is a doorway to you being able to be good like that. You don't like being irritated so easily. You don't like yelling at your parents. You don't like fighting and gossiping or backbiting. You don't like being deceptive or breaking promises. You want to have boldness and audacity. You want to be kind and gentle. You want to have a soft heart. This is what the people did as a means to gain that. Do you understand? And so he's saying that this one, after we say hierarchically as a principle, it is something that is up here in terms of its value and virtue. One, you want to do it because good people do this thing. And there's a relationship between it, that it creates goodness, and the goodness then brings you to doing it more. Does that make sense? And you know how you know that you're somebody who has the capacity to do this? Because the majority of you, a week from now, you're going to be praying in the night after Isha. You're going to be doing it. Whether you pray 2 rakahs or 8 rakahs or 20 rakahs or however many rakahs you pray, there's going to be some days in Ramadan where you are praying after Isha. So it's not something that's intangible, but when the shayateen are chained and the norm is that everybody's doing something, you're going to be doing it too. This is talking about you. Do you understand? It's not talking about somebody someplace else. It's talking about you. You just have to then stay committed to it after Ramadan is done. And you got to make a point to do it in Ramadan as well. Right? There's different opinions on Salatul Tarawih and what its intention and its purpose is. Some say it's just Qiyamul Layl, right? That after Isha you're praying things. Some will say it's a distinct prayer that the Prophet ﷺ prayed in Ramadan, but it's still Qiyam because you're doing it after Isha comes in. And we're going to get into this in a couple of sentences. Well, let's just keep going through this. It draws you nearer to your Lord, right? Do you ever get to a place where you're like, why is Allah not hearing my du'as? Why do I ask for things and I don't get them? The fundamental perspective of the divine is flawed in that line of thinking. right? The idea in our religion is you make the dua, and then you have trust in a God that knows better than you in terms of the response that he gives to you. You either get what you're asking for, you get better than what you're asking for, it's prevented for a later time, you're given it in the next world eternally, right? May Allah make us people of Jannah. And it's hard, it's crazy hard, because you want it, but Allah knows best. And so the tahajjud becomes a mechanism for those barriers and obstacles to be lifted, because there's no obligation to it for you. The way Fajr and Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha is something that you are obligated to do, you're doing it now simply because you want to do it. You're also doing it in a way that nobody knows if you're going to do it or not. Right? If you woke up in the middle of the night and you prayed this evening in your home, who's going to know that other than you and Allah? And what would bring you to doing that? When we pray Maghrib, may Allah keep our hearts sincere. But there's a different ease in us being able to do something simply because we're looking for a different validation from the people around us. You can't do that when you're alone by yourself at a time when everybody else is asleep. It's now simply because you either believe in what the point is of this, or you just really love to do it, or a combination of the two. But it's a mechanism, secondly, to get you to feel more the presence of the divine, and to want to have that awareness, that consciousness, and yield it through this as a practice. It atones for your sins, right? It's a mechanism to be able to now remedy the misdeeds that we engage in. Forbids you from evil, right? So it's now a protection, a shield. You want to get up, it's going to impact you. It's going to make things distinct. And there are things that are like that. When we come back from Umrah, Ramadan is done. There are certain things that fundamentally you just don't do the same way as you did before. It's just different at this point. And that's because the heart is being transformed, but the prayer is actually yielding what it was that it intended to yield. It becomes now a barrier between you and things that are just wrong things to do. I don't want to watch this stuff anymore. I don't want to listen to this stuff anymore. I don't want to hang out in the ways that I was hanging out. I'm not judging anybody, but my heart's just not in it, because this thing is creating now what it's supposed to do. It's keeping me from doing what is damaging to my heart. Do you see? And then it protects your body from sickness. And this can be understood as physical as well as spiritual, emotional, and mental wellness conditions. Right? The Quran is described as shifa. It's a healing in the most literal of senses. And its recitation is something that does not just impact you on a spiritual level. Your heart trembles and it shakes, but it also contributes to physical wellness. You can say, well, how does it do that? I don't know, right? That's just how Allah made it. So if you read it with regularity, you read it in the late hours of the night, you're reciting it, it's not going to do what you would assume it would do. Man, how am I not going to be able to sleep? How will I wake up and do things? You'll find that somehow, paradoxically, it is giving you more strength through less sleep, not giving you less strength through less sleep. And that's just what the metaphysical benefit of it is. If you think about yourself in a self-deprecating way, and you don't see how you are from amongst those who are the first sentence of this description, you get up after you have fasted the whole day, and you choose to pray Isha in congregation, after you have prayed Maghrib in congregation, and then you keep praying. And then you have a starting point that allows for you to say, picturing yourself in your head right now, have you ever in the course of your life prayed Salatul Taraweeh in Ramadan? And if you have, then use that as your starting point, that sentence number 1 is what you are embodying. You are getting up to pray this prayer that you are not obligated to pray, and nobody is going to be able to do anything to you if you don't. And the rest of these things will also come as openings. Know that the one who prays after the night prayer has risen at night. Does this make sense? So if you want to be written from amongst those who have risen at night to pray, all you have to do is pray after the night prayer. What is the night prayer? It's not a trick question. What is the night prayer? Huh? It's the Isha prayer, right? What time does Isha come in tonight? I just said it 10 minutes ago.
8 something.
Huh?
8 something.
8:45? 8:25. Great. Yeah. You got to know the times of your prayers off the top of your head. When you start the day, even if you have to look at the phone, it shouldn't be just fit in as a secondary. It should be what you're building your routine around. And this is a text that's on spirituality. You're not going to get anything out of it other than what you put into it. So if you treat your prayers as a secondary, they're going to give you something that a secondary option is going to give to you. So 8:25 today. What time does Fajr start tomorrow?
Tomorrow? At the Apple Boots.
No, that's great.
5:23.
5:23. Great. 5:43.
43.
Great. There's like different opinions on the degree marking for when Fajr comes in, right? Let's use the 5:40 time frame. From 8:25 tonight until 5:40 in the morning tomorrow, what this sentence is giving you as a principle is that at any point after you have prayed Isha, you pray something, you are written as being amongst those who have risen in the night to pray. When you're standing in front of Allah, it's not to play down the other titles and degrees and credentials that we accrue. But what is the station that will elevate you? And I'm saying you don't want to play it down, because you could be a doctor and a lawyer and an engineer and everything else that you are going to aspire to be in your life. May Allah put khair in it and give you a rizq that only comes from a source that is halal. But in understanding that amongst those titles that can be a means of benefit, wouldn't you want to have a label when you stand on the Day of Judgment that said, I was one of the people that rose up in the night to pray? Can you imagine if that was written in your book? And you don't want to get steps ahead of where you are. You want to be in a place where it's not, man, how can I wake up at 3 in the morning? All you gotta do, how long does it take you to pray 4 rak'ahs for Isha? How long does it take you to pray that?
About a minute.
Huh?
About a minute.
A minute to pray 4 rak'ahs. Man, you pray fast.
No, I mean-
4 rak'ahs. 4 rak'ahs in 1 minute. Yeah, you can pray it 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, right? So if you prayed Isha at 8:25 when it came in, sitting in your house, praying with other people, let's not say which it is. You're praying in your home alone. 8:25 hits. In between 8:30 and 5:40 in the morning, 9 hours, all you got to do is pray 2 rak'ahs. That's it. That's all you have to do. It's not anything more than that. And you can even pray it right after Isha is done. This is what he is saying. Know that the one who prays after the night prayer has risen at night. And then go do whatever it is that you want to do. You want to hang out with somebody till 1 in the morning? Go hang out with somebody till 1 in the morning. Nobody's saying don't do that. Make sure you're doing something that's worth it so that you're going to still get up for Fajr the next day. but you pray Isha at 8:25, and then you pray a couple of extra rak'ahs, and you're done by 8:35, and then that's it. And you're written amongst those who has risen in the night. The most blessed time is in that last third of the night. And as he talks more about this, he's going to say the distinction between tahajjud and qiyam is something that's apparent, but it doesn't mean that there is no barakah in doing it in the first third of the night. You got to go in a pace that makes sense for you. So you've prayed Isha, and now, before you go to bed, pray some extra rak'ahs. If you recite Surah Kawthar and Surah Ikhlas in every rak'ah, and you pray what is a handful of rak'ahs, it can literally take you just a handful of moments. You can't think about it quantifiably, but that 5 minutes of extra prayer, simply because you are buying into this, is going to open the floodgates of blessing and barakah. It just comes from this. And the sunnah is there, that the Prophet gave life to the time between the 2 night prayers, Isha and Fajr. He's doing something with that time. You see? Some of our predecessors used to pray their wird early in the night. However, rising after some sleep constitutes a defeat for the devil, in opposition to the ego, and contains a wondrous secret. This is the tahajjud which God commanded his messenger to do in his saying, perform tahajjud by night as an act of supererogation for you. It has been related that God wonders at a servant who rises from his bed. Right? So there's residual benefit to this. You get up in the middle of the night and you pray, then you're defeating the nafs. The nafs is lazy. That's what it is by its nature. It doesn't want you to be generous. It doesn't want you to be charitable or kind. It's going to tell you they're just sunnahs. Don't do them. You start to stamp it out, not for any reason because you're trying to prove to mom and dad that I'm a good Muslim, but you grow up now in your relationship to your faith. And you understand that this is about love. This is about igniting within your heart a sense of just courage and strength. It enables you to now take on the challenges of the world. A 1 minute prayer. That's all that it is. And it opens the door. And it allows for the heart to be sovereign, not the nafs. I don't want to be a lazy person. I don't want to be somebody who's unkind. I don't want to be somebody who hesitates in being charitable. I don't want to be somebody who hesitates in generosity, who hesitates in taking openings in front of me. I want to be somebody who's a source of light, who's a source of wellness, whose presence brings benefit. And you just pray some extra rak'ahs at nighttime after the Isha prayer is done. In one of God's revealed scriptures, as it continues, it is said, he is lied who claims to love me, but who when night falls sleeps and leaves me. Does not every lover love to be alone with his beloved? In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, he's described, that my eyes they sleep, but my heart does not sleep. That even when his body is in a physical slumber, his heart is in a state of wakefulness. And when he stands now in front of Allah, it's just positivity. That's all it is. أَفَلَا كُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a grateful servant? There is gratitude rooted in his standing. There's a positive element that is the base of this. The rest of this chapter continues to go on in this way, that describes now what it is that we can be doing. It talks about formulaically what goes into the actual numbers of rak'ahs. The most often quoted for qiyam and tahajjud is 11 rak'ahs, so 8 rak'ahs, 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, and then 3 rak'ahs of witr. And there's other narrations that denote different ways that this was prayed in terms of the numbers of rak'ah. Just pray something, right? Pray Isha on its time, and then pray some extra rak'ahs after you've prayed Isha, and get into the habit of it. This Ramadan, you want to spend your time after Isha praying, whether it's in your house or whether it's here with us or in another masjid. Engage in some of these things, right? And don't get into debates with people about how many rak'ahs does it need to be or not be. 8 rak'ahs is what you pray, then pray that. You pray 20 rak'ahs of Salatul Tarawih, then pray that. In the Maliki school, they prayed 36 rak'ahs, right? And why they would do this is because in Mecca, after every 4 rak'ahs, where they prayed 20, in between every 4, they would do a tawaf of the Kaaba, 7 circuits around the Kaaba. So in the Maliki school, to compensate for the 4 tawafs that they missed, they prayed an extra 4 rak'ahs for every tawaf that was prayed, so 16 extra. It's 36 rak'ahs, right? People will sit and say it's 8 or 20. Nobody's like, why don't we just do 36? But that's a valid opinion also. Do you know what I mean? Just pray something. You know, and you're not in a competition with anybody. You pray what it is that you have the capacity to pray. It becomes a source of light for you. And this is what the Imam al-Haddad is going to continue to describe in the remainder of this chapter. And you should continue to read it. And then allow for yourself to engage in the actual practice. Okay, Maghrib's going to come in 2 minutes, right? So I want us to just think about this for ourselves. And really quickly, if you can turn to the persons next to you, what are some of the things you're taking away from this conversation? Both in the immediate as well as in preparation for Ramadan. On Wednesday night, we're going to host our first gathering of the Tarawih prayer here at the IC. But what are you taking from this conversation before we break for Maghrib and Iftar? Go ahead. We turn to the person next to you.
I saw somewhere saying a lot of perfection nuance process. So you just try to keep getting better and slowly adding it. You don't have to do just one day no bars, like 5 bars, take it easy, but at least take steps and try to mitigate. You can fall back and get back right.
It doesn't have to be a commitment.
And then eventually you get to, like what, you eventually go from
the people that actually, the way super Chinese,
I think that's what they said in there, right? It's like the acts of more beloved are like consistent. Thank you.
Nice, man. It's up with
and not retire myself.
Just like trying to at least make attention. And actually like planning yesterday, even like at night to actually be able to wake up kind of like that first day on that.
But whatever made for it to be over. So like that and then
Okay, just so we can pray Maghrib in a couple of minutes, what are some of the things you're taking away from this conversation? I got one, thank you. What are we taking away? Yeah.
Aim for progress, not perfection.
Yeah, right? You want to progress. Perfection is a futile pursuit. If you're good people, you don't have to assume the default is you're not good. But a good person can always be better. And you have to grow in your practice of your faith as you move forward in this life's journey. What else? What else are we taking away from this conversation? Yeah.
when I interpret the way I interpreted the being one who's amongst those in the night who pray early, it's like it's not a matter of like I want this title so I can tell people I prayed. It's a matter of you're changing how, like, most people at that time, I want to sleep, or I'm too tired to. But when you have that intention, it's kind of like it's like a great thing. I can't even explain it. It's a matter of you're taking that extra step to become more of a better Muslim. And sorry, my mind's trailing off. But yeah, it's a matter of. Like I said.
yeah. You mentioned like you kind of grow with your spiritual journey.
Yes.
A little bit more.
Yes.
And it's a spiritual exercise, right? You have to think about it as an exercise. The same way you have physical exercise, it's analogous. So physical exercise takes time to grow through, especially when you just start it, right? There's literal, like, luminaries of our tradition that would say that they prayed the Qiyam for 20 years of their life, and then thereafter they enjoyed the sweetness of the Qiyam for the next 20 years of their life, right? It wasn't something that was overnight. Inshallah, we're not going to have to go through 2 decades to be able to experience it, but you can't taste something if you never try it to begin with. You know, you have to build a relationship with it, right? Ramadan especially, you want to seek to do this. Okay, we're going to have iftar right after Maghrib, and so we'll take a pause on the halaqah. Next Monday will be Ramadan, inshallah, right? May Allah enable us to benefit and reach from it. But you want to be able to start to think from now that there's still a couple of days, and this is just a handful of advices, just rapid fire. One, when shaitan has a little bit of time to do something, he's going to go full force. So you want to be on your toes and understand, fi sudurin nas, is that he's just hitting at the chest, but the way shaitan enters the heart is through you. Not through something external, but through things that are parts of you that you're most vulnerable. So what you know of yourself is going to be important between now and the first night of Ramadan on Wednesday, inshallah, where you have to just be vigilant. You do muraqabah. That's the 3rd chapter of this text. And you just be real with yourself. If you know there's certain things that you are poised to have more of a challenge with, then be smart about it, right? If I know that I get tested in certain ways by talking to certain people and not with other people, I gotta be mindful of it. I just have to be real. It's foolish to pretend like you aren't what you are, because then when you get caught off guard, you're just gonna hate on yourself more, and shaitan's gonna get you twice as much. Second, if you're a student sitting in this room, don't wait until Ramadan starts to start requesting accommodations. Even if you're not a student. I've written more letters for people who are working professionals this year than I've ever written in my life. I don't know why their bosses are listening to me, but I've written all kinds of letters saying that this person's going to be fasting, they're going to be doing this and that. The person writes back, we will help them to work remotely. We will let them do this and that. You want me to write you a letter? I'll write it, but it can't be in the midst of it only. Like, start prepping in that way too. If you haven't already, start to decaffeinate yourself. Your physiological aspects of fasting are attuned to the spiritual aspects of it, right? So it's going to be dumb that on day 1 you start to wean yourself off of things that you should have been weaning yourself off of a week ago, but you still have a couple of days to do it now. And I'm saying it to you because I love you, right? Don't be dumb in your practice. Be smart. The things that you know, why would you not do them? Really try to understand what you're readying yourself for, and think about it in a way that's not, it's a blip, but that this is a continuity to a journey. We're going to have iftars here every night of Ramadan, inshallah. We're going to hold night prayers, all kinds of programs. Be a part of those gatherings to uplift your heart and let your schedule be ready from now that anticipates it. Does that make sense? We're going to also need a lot of volunteers to help. And I'm going to say this both in the capacity, sign up to volunteer, but be nice to our volunteers. It doesn't matter that you didn't eat or drink all day. If you're in a bad mood, just bite your tongue and just say thank you to people because they fasted just like you did, right? Okay. Anything else that we have to announce before we stand to pray? Oh, this is what I was going to tell you. So Maghrib came in like a few minutes ago. I don't know if you were fasting or not, but in Ramadan, you want to also anticipate. The idea is to not just yearn for the food and the drink. It's not easy. We all have different relationships with it. But for example, in Maghrib time, when the time comes for the adhan, the sunnahs of the etiquettes of the adhan still hold true in Ramadan time. So you can't hasten to breaking your fast in a way that then deprives you from honoring the sunnahs of the adhan, where there's stillness and there's silence and you're repeating the words and you're making the dua after it, right? So the hastening to break your fast is not that it's got to be right on the dot that Maghrib comes in. And every one of you that's going to come to me and say, hey Khalid, it's Maghrib time, right? I know when it's Maghrib time, just like you know when it is. But before you put one of these in your mouth, make sure you're also then repeating after the muezzin. Make sure that you're also making dua after the adhan is called. And before Maghrib starts, you just pop one of these in your mouth. That's what the hastening is. Before you pray Maghrib, you break your fast. But as Maghrib comes in, you still honor the rights that are there in relation to that period of time. Do you get what I mean? And you do that for every other part of the night also, right? So that you're taking full advantage of it and doing whatever it is that you can through it, inshallah. Okay. Barakallahu feekum. We'll see everyone, inshallah, at Iftars coming forward.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.